When you hear the words iPod, iPad, iPhone, and MacBook, well, what comes to mind? Is it the largest company in the world? Is it your favorite way to connect with your friends or listen to your favorite music? Guaranteed one thought that comes to the mind is about a very successful company. The analogies, comparison, juxtapositions, and jokes regarding Apple's latest quarterly results practically write themselves. But do you know that this wasn't always the case for Apple? In fact, the company started from the lowest level and worked its way to the top. Hello and welcome! In today's video, we're going to share the story of a company which started from a garage and has now become the most valuable company in the world. Let's begin the journey of the rise of Apple. When was Apple founded? Apple was founded by Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ron Wayne in 1976. Started in the garage of Jobs' parents' house, and Wayne made a hand-drawn sketch of its logo. Wozniak made the Apple I computer, which only had a motherboard, memory, and a processor. It was mostly made for people who were interested in computers as a hobby. So it's not much of a surprise that manufacturers and investors didn't care much about the Apple I and Apple II prototype computers. Soon, Wayne left Apple and got an $800 check in exchange for his shares. Mark McCullough put $250,000 into the business in 1977 and got 1/3 share. At the West Coast Computer Fair in 1977, the Apple II was introduced to the public for the first time. Businesses liked the PC because it came with VisiCalc, which stands for Visual Calculator. Apple got its first real office the next year. In 1980, Apple went public and the price of its shares went through the roof. Some employees became millionaires overnight, and Apple made it into the Fortune 500 as one of the fastest growing companies ever. What caused a downturn in Apple computer sales during the early 1980s? The business soon ran into trouble. Apple's main mistake was not making a cost-effective follow-up to the Apple II in a timely manner. Jobs was very impressed by the Xerox Alto's features, especially in its graphical user interface, GUI. He was determined to use the best parts of it in Apple's Lisa. The Lisa, 1983, was late and cost $9,995, which was so much that only wealthy businesses could buy it. The Apple III from 1980 was a high-end computer with a price tag to match. The Apple IIe, which came out in 1983, was a popular home computer for the next 10 years, but none of them were enough. In the meantime, big companies decided to start selling PCs. IBM gave Microsoft the job of making software, but they didn't have to use only Microsoft's operating system, OS. Users invested in a well-known company. Developers focused on the successful Microsoft OS instead of Apple's system, which seemed slow. Bill Gates said GUIs were the future of PCs, but it was many years before Windows came out. Windows 1.01 was ultimately disappointing. Still, there was more competition because Microsoft made popular programs like Word and BASIC. 1985, Apple and Microsoft finally came to an agreement. This made sure that Microsoft would keep making software for Macs. What was Apple's first successful computer? Apple's Macintosh commercial, directed by Ridley Scott, was an instant success. It was shown at the 1984 Super Bowl and in movie theaters starting in January 1984. It's still thought of as one of the best ads ever made, even though the estate of George Orwell sent a letter telling the TV station not to show it again. Still, it was the first time people heard about Apple. That same year, the original Macintosh was called the computer for the rest of us, and the Apple IIc won awards for its high quality. As a high-end alternative, Apple made the Lisa II, which was later renamed the Mac XL. The price went from around $5,495 to $4,000, sales tripled. But CEO John Sculley said that Apple would lose money if it made more Mac XLs, so the company stopped making them. Jobs had hired Sculley away from PepsiCo, where he had been CEO. Jobs is said to have said, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugar water, or do you want to change the world with me?" Now, before we move ahead, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel so that we can keep bringing more information and fun videos for you. Your little contribution means a huge deal for us. The fall of Apple. Steve Jobs got involved in office politics, lost his job, and left the company in 1985. Apple sued him after he said he was going to start a new company to stop him from using sensitive information about the company to help his new company. This was finally worked out without going to court. Jobs started Next Incorporated with a computer that was $1,000 cheaper than and twice as powerful as anything Apple had made. Using the Next Step OS, the company made high-end computers at reasonable prices. 1993, Next sold its hardware business to Canon so it could focus on its OS. It stayed ahead of the competition by making sure that the OS could run on the latest hardware, like the Intel x86 and Pentium processors. Windows 3.1, which came out in 1993, was a big hit, and Windows 95, which replaced it, became the main competitor to Mac's OS. The recovery of Apple. Before he left the company, Jobs had suggested that Apple license Mac OS to Motorola and IBM. This started to happen in 1996 as the third generation of PowerPC processors began. Things looked good for everyone. Then Apple bought Next to make Mac OS better and stay ahead of its rivals. Steve Jobs gave an inspiring speech on behalf of Apple in 1997. He talked about the future of Mac OS and other popular Apple products. Microsoft liked the company so much that it put $150 million into it. When it came out, Mac OS 8 was seen as a huge success. Later that same year, the Power Mac G3 came out and the first Apple Store opened. When did Apple become a big company? The iPod, which was made by Apple, came out in 2001. It was advertised as being able to store 1,000 songs on its 5 GB hard drive, which was a huge deal for an MP3 player at the time. In 2003, Apple opened the iTunes Music Store to go with this. This was a result of iTunes, the digital music management software made by Apple that came out 2 years before in 2003. Apple made a version for Windows, and over the next few years, the rest of the world started getting it. The iTunes Music Store made it easy for people in the US to legally buy music online. When it started selling videos in 2006, it changed its name to the iTunes Store. In 2005, Apple computers got Intel chips, which meant they could run Windows. With iMacs and MacBooks Pro, Apple said that all of its PC hardware in the future would be based on Intel chips. When was the iPhone and iPad first available? The iPhone came out in 2007, and its iPhone OS, later called iOS, changed both hardware and software. The iPhone was a phone that could also play music and videos from an iPod. The next year, the iPhone 3G came out, which let people use a 3G data plan to connect to the internet. It was also a personal organizer, and the App Store made it the first smartphone that could run apps and connect to the internet. Since then, every year a new iPhone comes out, like the redesigned iPhone 4, 4S, 5, 5S, 5C that came out in 2013. The iPhone 6 Plus came out in 2014. It was a bigger phone, which led to iPhones with bigger screens. The iPhone 6S from 2015 was made for people who still wanted a smaller phone. But Apple soon stopped making small phones. Apple didn't make a ninth model. Instead, it chose to call its 2018 phone the iPhone X. So far, only iPhone 14 has been released. In 2010, Apple released the iPad, a tablet with most of the best features of the iPhone, except for the ability to make phone calls and the size of a small laptop. Like the iPhone, each year there are new models. The iPad mini came out in 2012, and the iPad Pro, which was bigger, came out in 2015. How much is Apple worth? In 2011, Tim Cook took over as CEO from Steve Jobs. Since then, Apple has grown to be worth more than $2.5 trillion. So what are your thoughts about the rise of Apple? Is it an inspirational story or not? Tell us in the comment section below. And if you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you don't want to miss out on any new future videos, then make sure to click on the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so that you're notified the next time we upload a video on the latest. Thanks for watching.